and thus they removed themselves far away from the cradle of mankind, where they could have been brought up in all piety and religious conviction. Instead, they sank into deep and degraded heathendom. Hamites also became scattered into southeastern lands from their first habitation. They occupied Babylon, Canaan, southern Arabia, and Africa. So they migrated there. They didn't come from Africa. They migrated there. These also sank into darkness of ignorance and worshipped idols. The Shemites immigrated southwest from their land and dwelt in Assyria, Arabia, and in the inner part of Asia proper, which is the centre of mankind and the best land in Asia. About the habitation of the children of Shem. Elam, the first son of Shem, went to the south of Fars, Persia. So people there spoke Farsi, and they probably do that today, speak that language called Farsi. Ashur, or Ashur, they say Ashur because that's Greek. They didn't have a sh, the sh in their language, so they put A-S-S-U-R, but here it says Ashur. The second son of Shem went and built Nineveh, and that country was named after him. Footnote down the bottom. Semitic philologists assert that Genesis 10:11 teaches that Nimrod was the founder of Nineveh. He went out from the land of Babylon into Ashur and built Nineveh. That's from the editor. Arpachshad, the third son of Shem, dwelt near the Mount of Ararat. During this time, two sons were born to his grandson, Eber. Their names were Peleg and Joktan. He became like Heber, and they became the Hebrews. At that time there was no Hebrew language, it was developed later. They were called the Awer, those who crossed over, those who made a journey, made a passage. These are the ones, the descendants of Abraham, his people. His people did this migration to the promised land, the land of Canaan, and his descendants dwelt there, etc. These were known as the Hebrews. So what they would have spoken in that day probably would have been Akkadian or Chaldean. And then when they entered the land of Canaan, they pick up on their tradition, their custom, their language, etc., their religion even, name of their god. They come out, and later on they develop a language. Okay, so these people that came out of Canaan were probably speakers of the Canaanite or Ugaritic language. There are modern scholars that attest to this. Okay, and the Hebrew language you have today is Israeli Hebrew, which is a revised version from the 1900s. It's been revised and supposedly it has its roots in the Canaanite Ugaritic language. Okay, so Arpachshad, the third son of Shem, dwelt near the Mount of Ararat. During this time, two sons were born to his grandson Eber. Their names were Peleg and Joktan. In the days of Peleg, the land was divided. Genesis 10:25. Joktan and his sons dwelled in lands located between the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf. Peleg and his sons dwelt near to the joint of a river which flowed into the Euphrates. Lud, the fourth son, went to Asia Minor and dwelt there and became known as the father of the Lydians or Lydians. Aram, the first son, remained in Mesopotamia, Beth Narin. That land was called after his name. Genesis 24:10, 25:20, 31:8, Judges and Acts 2:9. So this Mesopotamia here is also a Greek word meaning the land of two rivers. There's the original there in the Assyrian or Syrian, Beth Narin. So this ear here on the end is an indicator. Yeah, it's like they're the possessors of the land. It's like a end prefix or something like that, suffix. Okay, they're the possessors of that land, that geographical location at that time when the Greeks went in there. So we see that all these people, though one tribe, one nation, descended from one father, Shem, but on account of the various habitations in their respective countries, or geographical locations at the time, they are called Aramaeans, Assyrians and Chaldeans, but they ought to be regarded as one nation. Yeah, so later on they become known as those peoples, the Aramaeans, Assyrians and Chaldeans. Again, Assyrians is a Greek word. Chapter 2. The religion of the Aramaeans, Assyrians and Chaldeans. In the beginning there were two popular religions among all the people of the human race. First, the religion of the patriarchs, worshipping the true God, which began from Adam, the first father of mankind, in a narrow way was extended to Noah, and from Noah as a thin thread became extended to Abraham and Moses at the Mount of Sinai. The second, the rest of mankind, which were in the majority, were idolaters. They used to worship various creatures and elements. The Assyrians, Aramaeans, Chaldeans and heathen were idolaters, and they had many gods, varying in material, shape, form, construction and services attributed to them by the ignorant worshippers. The Chaldeans, or early Babylonians, used to worship the great light, the sun. The Assyrians also learned from them to worship the sun. The Chaldeans, in the days of their king Nebuchadnezzar, had a greater god than all others which they possessed. Its name was Bel. He had an image of man, but was very ugly. He had a human costume as dress. On his head he had a golden crown with horns. He had a temple which was constructed upon the tower and early ruins of Babylon. It covered a place of 180 square yards of ground and also 180 yards high. It was 8 stories high. There was a carriage way around it in a spiral form so that people could ride in carriages and drive to the top of this temple. The highest story, the 8th, was the office and the dwelling place of Bel, this god Bel. And that story was a bed and a golden table. In the lowest story of the temple was the picture of Bel, a golden table and a golden throne, the price of which would amount to $1 million. Every year $1 million of frankincense was burned on the altar of the temple. There were many images in it, and the height of every one was 12 yards. These images, and they were of solid gold. In this very temple, Nebuchadnezzar, there's a picture of him there, of a statue of him there. Statue of Nebo from Nimrod, British Museum, etc. Put the golden vessels which he had brought from Solomon's temple in the time of Jerusalem's captivity. Let's go back there just in case you missed a page by accident. In the very temple Nebuchadnezzar put the golden vessels which he had brought from Solomon's temple in the time of Jerusalem's captivity. The Assyrians also had many gods which they used to worship, but the greatest of all was Ashur, which was named after their first father. They used to entitle him the king of gods and the highest tribunal in judgment, the one who gives the crown, the hero who gives victory, and the protector of righteous people. He had a temple in the city of Ashur, which was called the Mountain of the World. This temple was the greatest and the most popular place of worship for the Assyrians during the entire period of their national existence. So you got these Kemet followers online, on YouTube, etc., with their videos saying that they were the first nation, etc. These Egyptians. That is wrong. Again, Ashur and Bel in their devilish and hellish cooperation jointly produced 12 lower gods to which respectively a special service was committed. Anu was to supply the need. Nisroch was the king of water. Sin, moon, who rules the firmament. Marduk
was the fortune teller. Bin was the one who assisted the water to flow and a raiser of fruits. Adar Shamdan was the hero of war and a god who conquers the enemies. Nebo was the great protector of heaven. Bailat, the wife of Bel, was general commander of war. Bel Dagon was the creator of the world. Shamash was ordained deacon of God, supervisor of heaven and earth and female god of war and love. We lost it here. Shamash was ordained deacon of God, supervisor of heaven and earth as a special representative of God. Ishtar or Ishtarot, probably known as Ishtar, god of heaven and earth and female god of war and love. Ashur and Bel did not have temples, only in Ashur and Babylon. But they had temples also in other large cities of their own respective countries of their own kingdoms. The people of that time thought that the world was full of spirits, some of which were dwelling in the very depths of the earth, and the others in water, and yet some others in the air. And they thought that some of them were good and some were evil. They used to imagine that the evil spirits were horrible, and they used to embody them with a human form, upon which there was the crooked head of an animal, such as the lion, eagle and dog. The good spirit was imagined to be in the likeness of an animal, upon which there was the human image. The best image was that of an ox with wings, and these images were put in front of the kings and lords. And people used to offer sacrifices of fruits and of oxen. Okay, so that's those winged bulls that you see in your museums, possibly. Okay, so they're not necessarily evil, okay, or Satan or anything like that, as many Christians claim. The best image was that of an ox with wings, and those images were put in front of kings and lords. The people used to offer sacrifices of fruits and of oxen and sheep. Committed during their festivities. The people of Nineveh used to offer human sacrifices to their gods as prisoners and strangers. Yeah, okay, so that was the evil part of that, right? What they used to get up to. The Syrians and Babylonians did not treat their dead as did the Egyptians. They used to lament their dead and anoint them with various kinds of perfumes and dress them and powder their faces and with white powder. They used to blacken their eyes with black powder, and they put on their necks necklaces of beads and rings on their fingers, and they put the hands of the dead upon their chests, and on their sides they put frankincense, cakes and water, and some of their dead they cremated. So way back then they had cremation, a type of cremation, right? The Chaldeans and Assyrians, though they did not reach the knowledge of the true God, even though they did not reach to the knowledge of the true God, were in their own wisdom able to imagine a great and powerful God who controlled the worshippers, stars and planets. Chapter 3. The ancient kingdom of Babylon. Its first king was Nimrod, whose name is mentioned in Genesis 10:10. He built 3 cities, Erech, one day Iraq, right? That's what it's known as today, Akkad and Calneh. In this kingdom there are writings and ruins which remain until now. This country is in the Bible called by different names. A. Shinar, Isaiah 11:11, Daniel 1:2, Zechariah 5:11. B. The Chaldean land is Zek, this Ezekiel 12:13, Jeremiah 24:5. C. Babylon, 2 Kings 24:1, 25, 27, 27, 25 and 27. Sorry, we'll repeat that. Babylon, 2 Kings 24:1, 25, 27, Psalms 137:1, Ezekiel 23:15, 17. The generation of the Chaldeans and Babylonians. By many it is thought that the Chaldeans in the old times were dwelling in Mesopotamia, Genesis 11:28. From there they moved southward and settled near the city of Babylon. The kingdom of Babylon came into existence by amalgamation of the Chaldeans, the sons of Shem, with the Babylonians, the sons of Ham. So it was a get-together, right? The boundaries of the kingdom of Babylon before the Persian invasion were the following. To the north, Beth Naren and Assyria. To the south, the Persian Gulf. To the east, Media and Persia. To the west, the Arabian desert. But in the days of Nebuchadnezzar, their king, after the climax of the development as a universal empire, this kingdom occupied the entire Beth Naren, or Mesopotamia, Persian, Syria and Egypt. The Babylonian kingdom before Nabonassar, their first king, was not entirely independent. It was subjugated by the Assyrians, to whom they did pay tribute. So it's basically ruled over by the Assyrians, and they had to pay a tax or tribute. Though the Babylonians had tried on many occasions to get rid of their oppressors, they did not succeed until the year 747 BC, when Nabonassar, the king, broke the bondage of the yoke, or the agreement, or their slavery, right, their subjection to them, and made their own country entirely independent and subjugated the Assyrians. Maybe they ruled over them. From this date until the time of Cyrus the Persian, who captured Babylon, this kingdom was an empire for the length of 87 years. Nabonassar, the first king, reigned from 747 BC to 733 BC. Nadinas, the second king, reigned from 733 BC to 731. Kinzinus, the third king, reigned, and it goes on about these with different kings. This king sent messages, as is Merodach Baladan, the fifth king, reigned from 721 BC to 709. This king sent messengers to Hezekiah, the king of Judah, in 713 BC. These messengers had in their hands presents and a letter of friendship. The king of Judah, Hezekiah, showed unto them the vessels of gold and silver which were contained in his house, and he showed them also his house of armament. Isaiah 39:1, 2 Kings 20:12. This Merodach Baladan was conquered by Sargon, the Assyrian king. This Sargon put in his place as the king of Babylon one of his own governors. Merodach Baladan succeeded in regaining his throne, and he reigned for a few months, and then he was conquered by Sennacherib, the Syrian king. Kisras, the king of Media, in conjunction with Nabopolassar, the governor of Babylon, went together and conquered Nineveh, the capital of Assyria, and they divided the Assyrian kingdom between themselves. Nabopolassar became the sixth king of Babylonia. He reigned over the Aramaic tribes of Mesopotamia and over one part of Elam, Egypt, Phoenicia, Syria and Palestine. And on the other side, the mountain ears in the northern portion of Assyria were governed by the grandson of Sennacherib, the Assyrian. Nabopolassar became the first king of the two kingdoms, Babylonia and Assyria. So they both got Greek names there, so because they've got the IA on the end, in prefix or suffix. So those are Greek names. So they probably had a different name in their language. He made some military expeditions to the west for the purpose of subjugating the nations, putting them under their boot heel, under their rule, dwelling at the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, but he did not succeed. He died 604 BC. The seventh king was Nebuchadnezzar. He governed from 604 to 561 BC. He fought against Phoenicia, Egypt, Palestine, captured Jerusalem, and destroyed the kingdom of Judah. He captured the city of Sur in 585 BC. He became the lord of Arabia and Egypt in 570 BC. In his conquest, he joined many of the small kingdoms into one kingdom. They all became united as one. And he organized the conquered lands into an empire, and he received the title of the King of Kings. Daniel 2:7. The age of the captivity is counted from the time that Nebuchadnezzar captured the city of Jerusalem, plundered the temple of Solomon, and brought the Jews as captives to Babylon, which took place in the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, until the returning of the Jews under the superintendency of Zerubbabel and Ezra, the high priest, to build the temple and Jerusalem. The length of the captivity was 70 years. And this looks like a stele there. Merodach or Marduk Idin Akhi, from a basalt stele in the British Museum, height 24 inches. There's a picture of him there, or an image of him there. The kingdom of Judah was 3 different times overthrown by Nebuchadnezzar, the king. The first time was in 607 or 606 BC. This was in the time of the king Jehoiakim. At this time also Daniel and some other princes with the king were bound and taken captive to Babylon. 2 Kings 24:1, 2 Chronicles 36:6 and 8, Daniel 1:1-6. The second time was in 599 BC. Nebuchadnezzar himself was present with this army, and the city of Jerusalem was besieged for a short time and captured. The king Nebuchadnezzar took 10,000 captives, among which were the mother of Jehoiakim, the king, and some other princes, and bound them and carried them to Babylon. And in this manner he took also with him to Babylon Ezekiel the prophet, Mordecai, and the treasures of the temple and palace. Jeremiah 25:11 and 12. The third time happened in the year 588 BC. Jerusalem was conquered by famine. It's overcome by famine. 2 Chronicles 36:9-10. The temple was entirely emptied and the city burned to ashes. The surrounding walls wrecked, and the greater part of its inhabitants taken captives to Babylon. 2 Kings 25:1-21. 5 years after these great national calamities, which occurred in the year 588 BC, Gedaliah, who was appointed by Nebuchadnezzar as governor of Jerusalem, was killed. Then on account of this rebellion and through fear of punishment by the Chaldeans, the rest of the Jewish population fled to Egypt, and the prophet Jeremiah also was in the crowd. 2 Kings 25:22 and 26. The city, which is full of the inhabitants, sat down alone as a widow. Lamentations 1:1. There in the city could not be found many people, except some nomadic Arabians and other nationalities of the same condition. Jeremiah 25:11. All this land will become ruined without inhabitants for 70 years. This nation will serve the king of Babylon for 70 years. The Jewish captives were oppressed very much by the lords, the Babylonians. Nebuchadnezzar died in the year 561 BC. The 8th king, Evil-Merodach, the son of Nebuchadnezzar, reigned from 561 BC to 559, and he was killed by his brother-in-law. The 9th king, Nergal-Sharezer, reigned from 559 BC to 555. His son, who was quite young and who reigned but a few months, was killed by One-Idus, the king. The 10th king, Nabonidus, reigned from 555 BC to 538. He installed as a partner of his crown his own son, Belshazzar, the crown prince, to reign with him, while Nabonidus was outside of the city of Babylon, engaged in battle against the Persians. Belshazzar, his son, was in the city. The city was besieged by Cyrus the Persian, and after 2 years of siege was captured, and the king Belshazzar was killed, but Nabonidus was captured by Cyrus. He was treated kindly. From this time on, the Babylonian kingdom was overthrown, and it became a possession of the Persians, the country of the Babylonians. Babylon was a plain without mountains, and it had a very hot climate. The lands of this country were very fertile and fruitful. It is said that the farms of wheat would bring a crop 100-fold, and the barley 200-fold. The farms and the lands were watered by the rivers Euphrates and Tigris. The Holy Scriptures called Babylon the ornament of kingdoms and the praise of Chaldea. Isaiah 13:19. That's why probably why it's called the Fertile Crescent, right? Because things would just grow amazingly there. The city of Babylon. Babylon was founded near by the great river Euphrates, about 200 miles above where the two rivers Euphrates and Tigris joined in one big stream, and about 300 miles above the Persian Gulf. About 300 miles northeast from it, and about 700 miles northeast of Jerusalem, was Nineveh. There was no other city except the city of Jerusalem, about which there were so many prophecies and threats as there were about this city. In Jeremiah 51:41, Babylon is called Sheshach, probably a name of one of its idols. In its size it was smaller than Nineveh, but it had more beautiful and wonderful places than that city. In the days of Nebuchadnezzar, the city was more decorated and stronger. It was built on both sides of the river Euphrates, and joined together by a bridge, very wonderful in its fine construction considering that day and age. The city was laid square in its form. Every one of its four sides was 15 miles in length. All around it would measure 60 miles. The city was divided into 625 square streets. Every one of its districts had 25 streets which were crossing each other. Its surrounding walls were 85 yards high and 25 yards in thickness, and they were built of baked bricks and pitch. The king Nebuchadnezzar planted gardens on the top of the walls in the honour and for the pleasure of his Persian wife, and these also cooled the atmosphere. These gardens were constructed in very peculiar places. On the top of these walls, pillars were built, and they were joined together on the top by long and broad powerful stones, then floored by baked bricks and cemented by pitch, upon the top of which they put enough earth and soil so that in it was planted various kinds of roses, flowers, and fruit-bearing trees. They were irrigated by the water of the streams elevated from the river Euphrates. These gardens appeared from afar as forests of mountains. The palace of the king Nebuchadnezzar was surrounded by 3 walls. The length encircling the outer wall was 6 miles. This wall had brass gates of such weight that 20 persons with great difficulty could open and close them. That'll stop a lot of invaders, right? Getting in there. You'd have to have half your army pushing the damn gate to get it open. Isaiah 45:1-2. The most wonderful construction in the building was the temple of Bel, the greatest of the idols. This was built upon the ruins of the Tower of Nimrod. Isaiah 45:1, Jeremiah 50:2, 51:44. This temple covered an area of 180 square yards. It was 8 stories high. Each succeeding story was smaller than the one just below it, and it had running around it a spiral-shaped road so that people could ride in carriages to the top of it. The highest story was the office and residence of Bel, in which were placed a bed and a table of gold. In some other story there was an image of Bel, a table and a throne of gold. It is said that their cost was $1 million. Besides $1 million worth of frankincense and an innumerable number of sacrifices were burned. There were golden images, every one of which was 12 yards high. In this temple, Nebuchadnezzar, the king, put the vessels which he had brought from the temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. It may be that on the top of this temple had stood Nebuchadnezzar, the proud king, and uttered that impious speech of his, saying, "Is not this great Babylon," etc. Daniel 4:30. That powerful king and his most beautiful city had become a small hill of ashes. God's work there, right? He totally annihilated it. This guy was pompous and proud, so he flattened it, possibly. The sciences and arts of the Babylonians. Their wisdom and sciences are praised by both the Grecian and Arabian authors. They had a very good knowledge of astronomy and mathematics. The Greeks confessedly were students of the Babylonians. In reference to their knowledge of the architecture, Genesis 11:4 states that the Babylonians tried to build a tower whose top would reach to heaven. Their palaces and famous towers, shape and form of their gardens, and the material which they used as the bricks and pitch which they made, look very much like those of the Egyptians. The Babylonian ruins testify concerning the skillfulness of the architects. They were also skillful in cutting stones and writing on them with Sassanian letters. They made their implements of war, their working tools, and ornaments from minerals. This kind of work was also found in the eastern part of Persia. Their looms, with which they used to weave various dress fabrics, rugs and linens, were famous for the character of the work turned out. They used to exchange these products for frankincense of Arabia, another Greek name, it's got the IA on the end of it, and for the jewels and precious stones of India, for copper and tin vessels of Phoenicia, for wool, silk, gold, ivory of other places. They had good commerce. The merchant marine of city of crowded the city named okay, of Chaldea, crowded the banks of the Persian Gulf. The Babylonian King's chronology. The first great history of the Chaldeans commenced 2234 years BC. The second organization of their kingdom was 625 years BC. The order of their kings is as follows, and it has it here.